What is up, everyone? It's Quinn here, and in today's video, I'm going to be going through the best fantasy football draft strategy if you have an early round one pick. So the 101 through the 104, going to be breaking down some of the best targets that you guys should be looking at in the early rounds. Then I'm going to be going through 4 different mock drafts, one from each pick, so the first, second, third, and fourth overall slot, just kind of showing you guys what types of teams you can put together with an early round one pick. If you guys enjoyed the video, do me a huge favor, hit that like button and subscribe. But let's just dive right into the players you should be looking at in the first round. This is obviously going to be the most important pick. This could be the player that either carries you to the championship or potentially sinks your entire season. So I used 4 for 4 ADP to get kind of like some consensus data here. Pretty much just takes the ADP from a bunch of different sites and combines it. So that's what you can see here. And then I've color coded it based on how strong I think the picks are in this range. So my current like clear 101 is Jamar Chase. I think in pretty much every draft, if I have the 101, I will be taking Jamar Chase. So I obviously think he's a great pick within the top 4 selections. I have like just recently within the last day or so kind of moved off of Saquon as my 102. I've bumped up Bijan Robinson to be my 102. I still have Saquon at 103, willing to move him back a little bit. It's honestly just a concern about the wear and tear coming off of like the monster touch season he had last year. So I have Bijan in green here. I think he's a great pick. I still think Saquon in the top 4 selections is very solid. And then when we get to the 104, I do think there's kind of like some wiggle room here. I could see an argument for that being Justin Jefferson, Jahmyr Gibbs, CeeDee Lamb. As of right now, I have Jahmyr Gibbs as my 104, but I don't think like a Jefferson or CeeDee Lamb would be bad picks there. So I think at the 104, if you're getting any of those dudes, I feel fine with it. Puka Nacua, Malik Neighbors, these are like mid-round 1 picks. I certainly think they belong in round 1. I like both of those guys, but I don't think they should be in consideration here with the top 4 picks. So 101, I'm going Chase. 102, I'm going Bijan. I think 103, there's some debate. Could be Saquon, could be Gibbs, could be Lamb, could be Jefferson, all viable options. Now moving into round 2, some interesting names on the board here. So the players that I think are strong picks in this range, we have A.J. Brown, Trey McBride, Bucky Irving, Ladd McConkey. For A.J. Brown, I don't think he has the highest ceiling, but I just think he is a very, very safe wide receiver 1. Talent-wise, I do think he could be a high-end wide receiver 1. It's just the overall situation here. Then for Trey McBride, someone who legit has that like game-breaking upside at the tight end position, has the upside to potentially outperform some of the wide receivers being drafted in a similar range. So if you're getting him late round 2, I really like that value. I think Bucky Irving is a fun running back end round 2. And then Ladd McConkey, I think he will be a fantasy wide receiver 1 this year, the clear-cut top target on a Justin Herbert-led passing attack. Then in yellow, I have Josh Jacobs. Personally, I don't love Jacobs here at the back end of round 2. I'd prefer to pick him like early round 3. But if you're sitting there at the 211, 212, I'm not going to say Jacobs is like a bad pick. I do think he's a fairly safe running back if he can stay healthy. I just personally prefer to kind of chase that upside at the running back position because there is that added injury risk. And so Josh Jacobs, want to say he was the running back 7 in points per game last year. He's being drafted as the running back 9. It's just the fact that he had a 67% opportunity share in 2024, and that was with very minimal competition. LaFleur just likes to use multiple running backs. He doesn't want to force feed a guy, and so he hit in the touchdown department. I don't see his usage getting much better heading into this upcoming season. So if he stays healthy, sure, he could return on this. I would just rather take a shot on someone who has some more upside or get one of these very solid wide receivers, in A.J. Brown, Ladd McConkey, Trey McBride at tight end, and I do slightly prefer Bucky Irving at the running back position. And then the players in red here, I'm just not going to be willing to take these quarterbacks in round 2. Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, they should be the top 2 quarterback picks this year, but not within the first 2 rounds. And then Kyren Williams, I'm just going to be much lower on him than consensus. So now looking at round 3, some of the same names are going to be in contention here because it's the 2-3 turn. Ladd McConkey would take him late round 2. I would certainly love the value in early round 3. Still not super in on these quarterbacks. Round 3 is when I'd start to consider them, but personally, it's more of like the middle of round 3, so really would not be pulling the trigger here. Kyron Williams, I'd take him in the fourth, wouldn't take him much earlier. I just don't trust his usage sticking with the competition they've brought in, and then him coming off a not so great overall season last year. I like these Bengals weapons, T. Higgins, Chase Brown. For Chase Brown, you're definitely betting on the volume, but I think in early round 3, the upside is there where I'm willing to take that risk. And then for T. Higgins, I mean, this dude was the wide receiver 5 in points per game last year. Now you're getting him in round 3. JSN just doesn't have the upside I love in this area. Now you might be thinking wow, there's not that many names available. A lot of dudes in red here. There are a few players that are actually going a little bit later in terms of consensus ADP that I'd be totally fine to take in this range. Most notably, Rashee Rice and Breece Hall. I want to say on consensus ADP, Rashee Rice is like an early round 4 pick. I could make a case for him going late round 2. I think the upside is very high for Rice. And then Breece Hall, I think, is also very interesting at the running back position, where I would take him over a guy like Kyron Williams, who's going in this range. So those are some of the early targets. Now let's take a look at some of these mock drafts. What types of teams can we put together here? So looking at the scoring setting, this is PPR. For the roster settings, 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, a tight end, 2 flex spots, and then 6 bench slots. We're not messing around with a kicker or defense here in these mock drafts. So the first one here from the 101, like I talked about, Jamar Chase is the top dog. I took him here at the 101 spot. Then the 2-3 turn, I think there were some interesting options off the board. Trey McBride falling to the late second. That's going to be a pretty easy pick for me here at the turn. Lock in that elite tight end. I've talked about this, I think, in some other videos, but I'm not super high in a lot of the tight end values once we get outside the top 2. I'm very willing to draft Brock Bowers. I'm very willing to draft Trey McBride. Outside of that, I typically find myself just kind of waiting and getting one of these late round guys, which sometimes you just don't feel great about. So getting Trey McBride on the roster, just to get to set and forget tight end throughout the entire season. And then I'm actually going to pair Jamar Chase with his teammate. Some people might not like this. I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. Now, would I want to start Chase Higgins, Chase Brown? Probably not. That's just way too much investment in one offense. But a unit we think is going to be, top 5 this year, getting the wide receiver 1 and the running back 1, I think is a fine pairing. Then when we get to the 4-5 turn, these are just the 2 wide receivers I had highest on my board. Now, Joe Burrow is actually 1 pick away from falling to us. The only time I'd consider Joe Burrow in the 4th round would be to stack him with Chase, but it's kind of one of those spots where I felt totally fine that he didn't fall to us. So I went with my top 2 wide receivers, maybe 2 options that aren't super stable, both a little bit volatile, being a year 2 guy and then a rookie. But I went with Teteroa McMillan and Xavier Worthy. I'm just going to be very in on Tet this year. These round 1 wide receivers come with a lot of upside. We look at the history of some of these, top 10 wide receiver picks in recent years. It's not all of them smash in year 1, but typically they're productive. You also have that huge boom potential with a guy like Jamar Chase or Malik Neighbors, who we saw last season. And then we get to round 6, 7 here, typically not taking a lot of running backs in these middle rounds. I'm not opposed to it, but I've just found myself taking a lot of wide receivers here. And so I'm going to go back-to-back wide receiver. Chris Olave in round 6. That's just a really solid value in my opinion. I know he has the concussion concerns. I know he's probably not going to be a part of a great offense, but in my opinion, he's just too talented to not take here. And then once again, went with my top wide receiver on the board here with Rome Odunze. I'll also point out that I didn't want to draft a player more than twice in these 4 mock drafts. So maybe I didn't exactly pick my best player available every single time, but at least guys within a similar tier. So at this point, we have all our wide receiver slots, through the flex +1. So Rome Odunze is coming off the bench here. Typically, I like to have wide receivers through the flex +2 that I feel confident playing because you're going to have injuries. You're going to have bye weeks. The odds of every single one of your, top picks hitting is pretty low. So at this point, we have wide receivers through the flex +1. We get to the 8-9 turn, and this is where I'm fine taking a quarterback. I'm typically not going to be, reaching up to get some of these early options. I'm very fine kind of taking a later round option, a Justin Fields, a, Drake May, Caleb Williams, guys in that grouping. But late round 8 Kyler, I think is fun. We also stack him to Trey McBride. Trey McBride's having a big year. Kyler Murray's also probably playing at a pretty solid level. And then we get that 6th wide receiver +2 through the flex. And I went with Ricky Pearsall. I do believe I have Jaden Reed one spot higher in my wide receiver rankings, but I ended up picking him in another mock draft. So I go with Pearsall here. Kind of an ambiguous wide receiver room, had a really strong close to the season. Can we see that year 2 leap? And at this point, we only have one running back, right, through 9 rounds. So we're just going to have to hammer that position. And ideally, we could get someone who could slot in and be like at least somewhat of a competent start in week 1. And that's what we get here in round 10 with J.K. Dobbins. Now, I'm not super optimistic that Dobbins is going to be the week 1 starter and hold on to that role throughout the entire season. I think RJ Harvey is going to be completely fine for fantasy, but I think early on, J.K. Dobbins could be very interesting and could be playable while some of our other backups, are kind of working their way into their backfields or just, potentially waiting on an injury to the starter. So Dobbins, I think, is a good pick there. Then the last 4 running backs, we go Bashal Tutin, who I think is a smash pick in round 11. Fun player, high upside in an ambiguous backfield. Then we go Trey Benson, Ray Davis, more kind of pure handcuffs. Benson maybe has some juice, as like a younger day 2 pick. And then we wrap it up with Jarquez Hunter. I mentioned how I'm fading Kyron Williams. If I'm fading Kyron Williams, I should also probably be somewhat invested in these backups. So sometimes I'll go for Hunter. Other times I will go for Blake Corum. But that's our first draft here. Overall, I think this is a pretty solid team. I think we're strong at wide receiver. We have the wide receiver 1. We have Tet and Worthy, who I think could be potential wide receiver 2 options. Really like Olave, Odunze, Pearsall as like depth pieces. Strong at tight end with Trey McBride. I think quarterback will be solid with Kyler. I think the only weakness here is the RB2 spot. But in like a hero RB build, I think we'll be able to churn that spot out. I think Dobbins will be fine production early on in the season. Then looking at our draft from the 2nd overall slot, like I mentioned, Bijan Robinson jumped up to my 102. So we go with Bijan to start off this draft. This is actually going to be another Trey McBride start. So we get the elite tight end in back-to-back drafts here. And then we get to round 3. And this was probably like my favorite start that we got in these 4 mock drafts. Getting to start with Bijan, Trey McBride, and Jonathan Taylor, I think is just amazing. So feel great about that. Double hero RB build. We're just going to have to get serious about wide receivers in round 4 on. And as you can see here, that is what we did. So we go back-to-back wide receivers with DK Metcalf and DJ Moore. 2 guys who I'm not sure if I'm going to have a ton of shares of this season, but I did think they were like somewhat interesting options when their names were on the board here, like late round 4. Early round 5 territory. Then we take a detour that I wasn't really expecting at the running back position. Ideally, I would just be hammering out wide receivers here, but I was looking at the board at a 6'11 Travion Henderson, and I felt like I couldn't pass that up. So we end up going running back here, 3rd running back through 6 rounds. We lock back in at the wide receiver position. I go Jacoby Myers, who I think is a very, very safe option, right? Wide receiver is not going to be the strongest. Let's get a guy who has been a wide receiver 3 or better in 3 straight seasons, a wide receiver 2 in back-to-back years. And then I get Josh Downs, who I just think is one of the most underrated wide receivers this season for fantasy. This dude was the wide receiver 28 in points per game last year in an awful offensive situation. He's heading into year 3. Could have better passing quarterback play out of Daniel Jones. I think he's an easy pick in late round 8. And then we go with Jaden Reed and Trey Harris. Reed, I think, interesting option here with the Packers. Trey Harris, kind of a higher upside flyer. Then we get a round 11 Justin Fields. At this point, I was fine with Jordan Love or Justin Fields. We could have had the stacked Jaden Reed or just a naked Justin Fields, who I still think is just a really strong pick here. Like the upside that Fields can give you with his legs could be very competitive with some of the guys who are going in, round 4, round 5, round 6. It's not crazy to think that Justin Fields could be very close in points per game to, a Joe Burrow, a Patrick Mahomes, guys like that. And we're getting them like 5, 6, 7 rounds later than when those guys were selected. And then we wrap up this draft with 3 straight running backs. You could certainly make the case that maybe one of these picks should have been a wide receiver. I just didn't know if there were any great options on the board. So we go Trey Benson, Jalen Wright, and Jarquez Hunter. So obviously the strength of this team is the running backs. Bijan Robinson and Jonathan Taylor as a 1-2 punch is super dangerous. Then we have Travion Henderson, who I think could be a hammer later on in the season once he kind of emerges out of this Patriots backfield. The depth options are fine at running back. Wide receiver, a little bit weak, right? DK Metcalf, DJ Moore, you're hoping those guys can be wide receiver 2s for you. Jacoby Myers, I think a very safe option. Downs, I do like. It starts to get a little sketchy when we're looking at like Jaden Reed and Trey Harris. Maybe you make a trade in the season or you hit on someone on the waiver wire. And then I still feel good, though, about tight end, obviously, with Trey McBride. And then quarterback, I know we kind of waited for a later round option. I really like Justin Fields being a fantasy football quarterback for me heading into this season. Now, looking at our draft from the 3rd overall spot, we go with Saquon Barkley. Like I mentioned, I don't think this would be crazy to be a Lamb pick, a Gibbs pick, a Justin Jefferson. I do have Saquon here right now. Like I've talked about, I am kind of considering continuing to drop him, but I think Saquon at the 103, very solid option. Then we go with Ladd McConkey in the late 2nd round. Big fan of him heading into year 2. Had a really strong close to the season over the second half. Was averaging over 18 points per game. Do think we could see a little bit more of a pass-heavy attack here from the Chargers. Then in early round 3, I go with Rashee Rice. From an ADP standpoint, this is probably a reach, but he was my best player available in this spot. You look at the 6-game sample size to end the 2023 regular season, the first 3 weeks of 2024 before he got hurt. Like, Rashee Rice has been an absolute monster. If he's able to just step right back into that same role, he is going to be a huge league winner. Then in round 4, typically not looking at running back a ton in this range, but we get a late round 4 Marion Hampton, and that's almost always going to be like an easy draft button here. So I go with Marion Hampton to be our running back 2. I think some people are concerned with Najee Harris. I'm just not. Like, they gave him a 1-year deal in free agency. He's proven to not be a difference maker at the running back position. You don't draft a Marion Hampton in round 1 and just like hand the reins over to Najee Harris. It really would just make no sense. And then we start to get serious about wide receiver. Hammer 4 out so we can be wide receivers through the flex +2. We go with my guy Tet McMillan. We go Roma Dunze late round 6. Jacoby Myers, very safe option in round 7. And then we go with Jawan Jennings in the late 8th. Jawan Jennings late 8th round I think is crazy. Like, I don't even think I'm super high on him. I do think that's just a really, really strong value. Then in round 9, I go with Kyler Murray again to be my quarterback. Like I've talked about, I am just in on him this season. I'm willing to pay up like a round extra to take him over like the Jordan Love types, guys like that. Very consistent year after year. Like, he's just consistently been a quarterback 1 option. And then there's also flashed a little bit of that upside. Now with this next pick, I don't feel great about it. In round 10, I went with Tucker Kraft. I was kind of afraid of getting frozen out at the tight end position. I think Kraft will be fine. Back end tight end 1, fringe tight end 1. I like him as a player. I just don't know if he comes with a ton of upside. Now in this range of like Kraft, Kincaid, Goddard, Ferguson, I do pretty clearly prefer Tucker Kraft, but the pick doesn't feel great if I'm being totally honest. Then we just hammer out running back for the rest of this video. Bajal Tootin, Isaac Guerendo, Tyler Algier, and Blake Corum. Bajal Tootin is just such an easy pick in round 11. Guerendo kind of banking on the health concerns of Christian McCaffrey. Tyler Algier, pure handcuff for Bijan Robinson. And then Blake Corum, like I mentioned, betting on the non-Kyron Williams running backs. You might be wondering why I keep ending these videos with a lot of running backs. I just think the running backs have way more upside in like these later round options compared to the wide receivers. Like, you're asking me, do I want Tyler Algier, who could become a top 10 running back with an injury, or do I want a guy like Cedric Tillman or Rashad Bateman? I actually like Rashad Bateman, but I still think it's not a great pick. I will say, if Kyle Williams here at the 1209, if he fell to the 1210, I probably would have taken him because I do think he's a fun pick. But outside of that, these later round running backs, in my opinion, just come with a lot more upside. And then the final mock draft here, the 104, we are going to start it off with a Jahmyr Gibbs selection. And we're actually going to go hero RB here because we get Jonathan Taylor in the 2nd round. Just a really strong start with 2 very, very solid running backs. 2 very different types of running backs, but 2 guys who I think are going to give you really nice production. Then we go with another round 3 Rashee Rice. And this was just a clean sweep of wide receivers here. In the next 6 rounds, we go Rashee Rice, DJ Moore, Devonta Smith, Jalen Waddle, Calvin Ridley, Josh Downs. I've kind of noticed this like later round 4 area doesn't feel great in my opinion. Like, it kind of feels like you have to reach on some of these wide receivers that you don't love. Like, I'm not a huge DJ Moore guy. Don't necessarily love taking him in like the later 4th round or like mid 4th round area. And then it's like, yeah, I could reach on like a Tet McMillan, who would have been my top guy on the board, but I'm not trying to take him in every single draft. Devonta Smith, just like a very safe wide receiver too in the 5th round, is good value. Jalen Waddle, very high on him this season. I think we could see a major bounce back from him and potentially take like a leap even from what he's done in previous years. And then Calvin Ridley, good wide receiver, quarterback upgrade. Not sure what the upside looks like. And then my guy, Josh Downs. Then we get off of the wide receiver position, feel pretty good about this, wide receiver room as is. And I go with Cam Scatabo, round 9, ambiguous backfield, fun rookie. I think he's a good value there. Then we get my quarterback in round 10. We pair DJ Moore with Caleb Williams. I think he's going to be much better for fantasy. Has some rushing upside that's slept on. I think the passing production is just going to be so much better with Ben Johnson. Also, just a really strong group of weapons around him. DJ Moore, Luther Burden, Rome Odunze, Colston Loveland, Cole Kmet, an embarrassment of riches, plus arguably the best offensive mind in the league as his head coach. Snag 2 more running backs here, Jaden Blue, Roshan Johnson. You can see here from round 10 to round 11, we lost out on 3 potential tight end picks. Dalton Kincaid, Tucker Kraft, Dallas Goedert. At that point, I could have gone with Jake Ferguson. I think I tried to kick the can down the road, and he ended up going to another team that had a tight end, paired him with Mark Andrews. So that didn't feel great. At this point, I'm like, all right, I'll just wait. I'll take 2 later round guys. So we go with the veteran and then kind of a younger potential ascending option. Hunter Henry, I think, is somewhat undervalued. He's obviously not going to be a league winner for you, but could he slide in and be like a back-end tight end 1 in an improved Patriots offense? I think sure. And then Brenton Strange, Evan Ingram's gone. Had some decent games last year. Obviously, new head coach with Liam Cohen coming in. Could be an interesting option. So looking at our team here, Caleb Williams, fine, like back-end QB1. Really strong with the 2 running backs, Jahmyr Gibbs, Jonathan Taylor. I like the depth we have in the wide receiver room. And then tight end is obviously going to be the weak point here. Obviously, we're going to be looking at waivers and then kind of just hoping that one of these dudes pops. But that is going to wrap it up for the top targets, the mock drafts. Let me know your thoughts. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them down below. I'll also have videos coming out with mid-round 1 picks and then late round 1 picks. But thank you all for stopping by, and I will see you in the next one.